International Hospital, the Research and Programs Department. On your screen, you will see a poster on the medical legal issues in health. We are having a series of the medical legal issues in health webinar symposium. So we look at strategies of how to stay in the practice and out of court. We had the first session on the 26th of August 2020, and we had a really nice webinar presentation. So we'll be doing this every Wednesday. So this coming Wednesday, we will be talking about legal issues in health. As a follow-up of our medical documentation, now look at the legal issues in health. So for CPD points, kindly email us at knhcpd@gmail.com if you have any issues, or cpdpharmacy@gmail.com, and stay tuned with us even during this webinar and the other the medical legal symposium that we are doing every Wednesday. So stay tuned every Wednesday. It'll be Medical Legal Wednesday. Right now, I'd like to invite the presenter for today. He will introduce himself. By name, he goes as Eric Omondi, but I'll give him the chance to introduce himself and start the presentation. Karibu.
Thank you, Daktari. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. Today I want to take you through healthcare risks and BCP plans and continual resilience during this time of pandemic. I lead a team of auditors at KNH. I've worked in the hospital for the last 7 years. I've trained both local and international team on BCP and risk management. I hope you'll pay attention. You can ask questions. You can type there, then I'll be able to respond at the end of my presentation. So please stay alert. We'll be able to share more as we go along. I can share my screen.
Yes, you can.
There we are. For today, we are going to talk about healthcare risk management strategies and business continuity plans during this pandemic. We have been able to feel what we have gone through. I'll take you through the agenda of the day. I'll take you through an overview of risk and risk management and the mitigations and the strategies and the opportunities. I'll take you through business continuity plan during pandemics. I've picked an example of supply chain interruption. I believe most of us are using consumables, they have a vote whereby maybe there are stockouts. Then we are going to look at mitigating concentration risk of some of these suppliers. We look at the various types of suppliers, and then we'll just touch a little bit of human resource and continuity, and then I'll handle questions and answers. Then from what I've taken an example of supply chain interruption, you can use the same format to do for your area that you're working upon. We are looking at the global numbers. Currently, I've just picked this from readily available data. We are looking at the 25.3 million. That's almost some country or half of our population, Kenya. Then recovered, we are looking at 16.7 million. Deaths so far global is 0.84 million. Kenya, we are looking at 33,000 who have been affected. Recovered, we are looking at 19,000. That is at the end of August. Then deaths, we are looking at 572. I want us to decode the economics of COVID-19. On your screen, you can see you can see that we have the losers. We have the oil and gas. We saw sometimes back months of July, we were buying fuel even as low as 80 shillings. We are looking at the education sector. Our children can't go to school, and also the higher institutions. Though some are doing online classes, but we're able to see that even the people who depend on the education sector, like the private school, government schools, the suppliers there, they cannot be able to deliver. There's livelihood which have been affected. Financial services, there's moratorium from the CBK that in case a debtor cannot be able to pay his or her loan, the banks cannot be able to auction those assets. We are looking at manufacturing, non-essentials. Some industry have closed. If you go to EPZ, construction and real estate, there's been a slow pace. Automotives, we have seen the prices of cars from Japan going down, even locally. Aviation and maritime have really been affected. I saw today a round trip from Eldoret to Malindi was going for 8,000, something that you will not be able from this airline called what? The pink color one. Huh? Then tourism and leisure, they have been really hit. If you go to the Mara, you go to Amboseli, you go to even most hotels in Nairobi like Serena, Sarova, most of them have downside and even closed. And we're looking at those were key serious revenue generators to our economy. How much has the government lost in terms of taxes that they were collecting on those areas? And how many kind of families that have been affected that cannot be able to support themselves in terms of paying rent, meeting their basic needs. Some have even relocated to the rural areas. We are looking at the key gainers, agriculture. Farmers have really gained. They are selling their produce. They have been able to move. They have those licenses. E-commerce. Even now, we have seen it's a big enabler. You can be able to buy items and be able to receive them. ICT. We have seen personal health care, like the manufacturers of the, the sanitizers, food processing and retail, medical supply and services. We have seen, like in our hospital and other, the budget for healthcare has really increased. We are seeing these information in the public, community acquired workplace, increase unemployment, business outward focus. We are looking at our roles and responsibilities as employees. What do we need in healthcare? We need to receive adequate information and training on OSHA and IPC. We need to have continuous sensitization of our team members that you need to continuously have the personal protective equipment if you're working on those high-risk areas like lab, theaters. We are looking at those people who are above 58 years old who have terminal illnesses. They need to stay at home or seek medical attention as per the government protocols. As employers, as employer like KNH or other health facility, which is not KNH, other healthcare providers, we need to have workplaces, machinery are safe, that they're continuously being calibrated, cleaned, continuous cleaning of them. We need, as our employer, healthcare provider, you need to provide personal protective equipment, provide for measures to deal with staff isolation. I've seen, like in the hospital, there's an isolation unit for staff. I've seen staff are being continuously trained on IPC and OSHA guidelines. We are looking at, I've classified the various low exposure risk, medium risk, high risk, critical risk. I'm looking at those areas with high critical risk, exposure to known or suspected sources of COVID-19 during specific medical, postmortem, or lab procedures. I'm looking at precautions in all sectors. These are some things that have been preached and I see even in our local television. I wish in our healthcare institution we could have as many stickers as possible or screens, the message so that it syncs not only for healthcare workers but also to the public, like screen staff daily in KNH as we come in. Are we screening all our staff daily, or they just walk in? The IPC protocols. Do we have all healthcare workers have IPC protocols in place? Use of mask. Are we sensitizing our staff members to ensure that they use mask properly instead of hanging them below their chin? I'll take you through risk management briefly, just on the framework. We have areas of integration, we have design, we have implementation, we have areas we normally do evaluation and then improvement. Integration, we need to integrate it with all our processes. We are looking at the context of on your screen, you'll be seeing something called establishing the context. Establishing the context, I'm looking at both the SWOT and the PESTEL. That is the environment, the external and the internal environment. What are the objectives that we have set in as a department or as a hospital? What are our objectives? One of our objectives is to improve customer satisfaction. In our processes during this pandemic, are we sensitizing that we need to improve our customer satisfaction to a certain percentage? Then also we are looking at the next context is risk identification. That's the process of risk management. Then risk analysis. We need to analyze this, assessment, then evaluate if they are low risk. Then you need to treat these risks. Like if we have assets in the hospital, we need to insure them. Then there are other things you cannot be able to achieve some certain targets. You need to put like avoiding, putting locks like our gatekeeping areas. Then on your right hand side of the screen, you'll see monitoring, review, then communication and consultation. That is with the various providers. This is just the context. I don't want to go into details about this. We will have more discussion with this with the various departments if you're working within KNH during this financial year. Then I'm looking at, we have what we call the 3 lines of defense. The first line of defense is the healthcare department, the KNH departments and divisions. Wherever you are, even if you're not working in KNH and you have joined us for this discussion, in your area, there's those people who first deal with the various operational issues. Then we have second line defense, the organizational structure. How have we structured the risk items? We have the board, we have the chief executive, then we have risk officer, directors, risk champions representing all area units that need to, who are participating in these areas of risk. Then the third line of defense is internal audit, that they give assurance that all risks are being mitigated on a timely manner. Then the other items, sorry. So what is risk? Risk is the effect of uncertainty on objectives. You know already your objectives for the year. Maybe one of them is to ensure that if you're working in clinical areas, you're a nurse or a doctor or a healthcare professional, that you have to take vital signs for all your patients or all your clients. So if you don't take those vital signs, it means you are not, you'll have risks. Assume that patient has COVID and he or she affects you and you did not measure the temperature or take the vital sign. So the effect of uncertainty on the objectives, like one of them, we are supposed to achieve our customer satisfaction, let's say 90%. If we don't achieve 90%, we have been able to only achieve 80%. It means that's a risk. It means our clients are not happy. So look down in your area which you're working, establish your objectives. Just work with maybe 4 or 5 for the year. Look at them in your area. Identify those things that, what are the uncertainty on objectives? What are the objectives? Maybe it's to increase theater utilization. Maybe it's to decrease the hospital acquired infections during the year. Maybe it's also to increase revenue, or also to ensure that 100% availability of essential drugs. Then we have risk and opportunity. In all types, there's the potential for events and actions. That is the downside and upside. The ISO 31000 2018 requires that as we identify the risks, we need to identify both the opportunities also. I've taken you through what the ERM is all about. Then I'm looking at hospital response through the COVID-19 phases. How has KNH responded through the various COVID activity? Before COVID, we had IPC measures, processes, and protocols were in place. We had, during the pandemic, around February, March, those restrictions on elective procedures and outpatient activity during the early stages, additional facility capacity and resources. We established Mbagathi. We have also established other areas like the near A&E. Then we have adapted new protocols. We have developed new SOPs, many activities, operating practices, introduced frontline hospital employees and doctors were provided with clear instructions and necessary PPE patient reassurance through continuous engagement. We have given our healthcare provider, we have adapted that this thing is with us. We have given even all our staffs PPE and face masks. Then there's a reform, a new healthcare emerges, new opportunities and challenges to deliver on its purpose of enhancing the quality of life and being a patient-centered referral hospital that people trust for all their healthcare needs. We have seen that we have really come out and most of donors are coming to the hospital. If we were not changing, if we had not seen that opportunity, the donors and the various partners will not have joined us. That's how we have gone through the phases during this period of pandemic. And this is how we come up with the various risks, fundamental measure. I'll take you through, not this today, not a risk assessment class. I'll just take you through briefly some of our risk encountered during COVID-19. Those patient safety. Patients' failure to attend clinics due to fear of COVID infection. There are some cases which people missed clinics, the patients. There was a patient safety, they really feared coming. The improvement, the mitigations in place that we have put, this patient charter, we have continuous monitoring and analysis of patient outcome through the clinical audit, staff training and sensitization on IPC. Then we have also improvement actions that we have done, continuous monitoring, and then also sensitizing staff to avoid anxiety. The other is hospital reputation, adverse effect on the hospital. Maybe there have been people complaining they cannot access the hospital during this time. Project risks, some project delays, performance, compliance, and regulatory requirements. We are required to comply with so many regulations, performance, finance. We are looking at people who cannot be able to pay their bills, operational risks, stockouts. I just could take you through shortly on that. We are looking at assessing risk in a post-pandemic world. The questions we should ask ourselves: what does organization staffing look like now? Are we having people who are over 58 more? Have key stakeholders changed? What new clients should we anticipate? Have workforce reductions impacted how interns are executed? What processes have been temporarily or permanently changed? We know that most of our meetings now are being done online. We used to have our symposium, this kind of symposium in university. Now we're having the online one. Has the organization's strategic focus changed in the near or long term? The people in planning and the top management in your areas or your area of your working, have you looked at your strategic direction which you had planned last 3 years? What is going to affect you this year and the next 3 years? Have there been fundamental in the debt, capital structures? Have new business opportunities emerged and have corresponding risks been identified? Have we done risk assessment? Have the fundamentals of business unit operations or strategies changed? Are we going with the same strategic plan? Have business continued dynamics changed? I want us to take note of that because I'll be having a small presentation on business continuity. Key infrastructure changes, key customer changes. What have we done with our infrastructure? Our key customer, have they changed? How have enterprise risk management dynamics changed? Key risk indicators, response plans, and risk appetite. What have we done during this post-pandemic world? Return to workplace risk. Has management adequately identified and assessed return to workplace related risks? Do proposed return to workplace policies and controls address the key risks? Are policies and controls effectively implemented? We have done policies, controls are there. We have the various policies. Have we implemented them, including communication? How do we communicate to our various providers and our staff? Is the overall program functioning as intended or improvements warranted? What we have done, like do we just spray, fumigate our offices, maybe because one of our staff was diagnosed with COVID, or do we have a regular schedule that we need to do it? Then we are just looking at the normal one. There are other cyber risks in a COVID-19 world, because now most of our things we are doing now online. Even our studies, we talk more online. Network security. To access any organization, you should be required to use a VPN. If we use a remote desktop, only should be whitelisted by our IT department. There's issues with network, personal devices. We have phishing schemes. There was one group in Vietnam, one group calling themselves Mustang Panda, used phishing that contained a compressed Windows archive file that they claim had statement on the pandemic from the Prime Minister of Vietnam. When the file was opened, it was an innocent-looking Word document that was actually running macros in the background to initiate a command and control attack. Since the computer could sit behind the network firewall, the criminal now has access to network data or could choose to shut down the network entirely. This cannot happen to us even when we're doing this webinar. Somebody can just send a file that this is a statement from the president. We normally open them. We see them a lot in our WhatsApp and emails. Huh? If you open it enabled the criminal to access the network of that organization. So we need also to look at other areas, not only the physical distance, but the other risks in the cyber world evolving during this COVID-19. There's also file sharing for those who are in IT world. There's also the issues to do with general data protection on Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. There's also issues to do as we are moving more towards the online issues, internet. How are we protecting patients' information? We need to look at review the level and decision made regarding staffing for IT security and support. Does the organization, when they are boarding new IT staff, is there a way we do background check? Where was the staff working? Do we try and find out what is the can you be able to talk to the sheikh or the imam or the priest or the pastor, those kind of things, or do a confirmation from where the person has done during this time, or we just bring them because we have a shortage. We need to review the business in case of a data breach caused by internal or external remote workers. We need to review all those areas. COVID-19 opportunities we have seen as KNH, skills and capacity of incident man staff, health profiles, regular updates, enhanced staff insurance policies. We have seen that, employment of small staff, expansion of services, increased revenue due to KNH being a test center, COVID-19. Those are some of the opportunities we've been able to experience as the hospital, as you saw in the economics of the COVID-19. I want to link business continuity plans and risk management. Business and disaster recovery planning, key consideration for organizations like in healthcare. Look at, we have BCT definition and benefits, COVID-19 resumption and restoration of business. Those are time risk management and relationship to BCP. Then we have building our resilience for the future. That this thing is with us. We have to deal with it so that we're able to move our key business process in healthcare well. New normal. We have the workplace. We have technology and the need for a digital. We have focus. We need to focus. Then the consumer trends. What are our customers, our patients, our suppliers, our partners? What are they looking for in the new normal? Resilience definition. We have a modern definition, advancing despite in your dictionary. You can look at the word, what resilience, what it means. Goal orientation, work towards your vision, be proactive, don't wait for adversity, both large and small everyday challenges. We need to see how we deal with these issues to do with the pandemic during this time of in healthcare work. We are looking at, in relation to the pandemic, we are looking at proactive business continuity management activities. We are looking at incident occurs, normal operations, recovery time objective, normal to return to normal operations, reactive response, recovery and prevention and risk avoidance, mitigation, acceptance. You cannot talk about risk management without talking about business continuity management. How do you deal with the risks after that? Do you just avoid? Do you just mitigate? Do you just accept? What is business continuity? I'll go to the definition of ISO 22301-2019 clause 3.3. Capability of an organization to continue the delivery of products and services within acceptable timeframes at predefined capacity during a disruption. In our strategic plan, KNH has promised to develop a business continuity management plan, which was to be developed in the last financial year, which I believe it's in place. So we saw it as the drafters of the plan that we needed to have a business continuity plan. Have we in your area of work, you need to look at in your department as a leader or a staff who are in this webinar. Look at, are you in your department, are you delivering products within acceptable timeframes at predefined capacity during a disruption? We are in a disruption. You see, risk, it's uncertainty on objectives, but business continuity is telling us you need to deliver products and services within acceptable timeframes at predefined capacity during a disruption. The disruption is during this pandemic. It also involves a culture of building resilience against disruptions to business operations. We have seen, you have seen the COVID in that slide of economics of pandemic. We have seen the various industry like aviation, hotels, they have been really affected, which means they had maybe a business continuity plan for other things, but not for pandemic. We need to, it also involves ability to restart critical operations in a timely manner after disruption. As a doctor or as a nurse, you realize that you have a patient who has COVID. How comfortable are you to take care of that patient? Or you have a supplier if you're working in supply chain or finance, a vendor brings you an invoice. How do you deal with that? We are looking at, we need to look at, we are looking at uncertainty of the objectives. And also we are saying as healthcare workers, we need to offer products and services. Our main product is we offer specialized care. We also offer research. We also do what? Do training. Are we offering this or have we suspended others because of the disruption? But business continuity requires whatever we have developed. The board saw it fit that we need to have a business continuity management plan so that during this time of pandemic, during our disruption, we're able to deliver it on a timely manner. Business continuity. We need to, there's the business, we need to identify risk assessment, analyze, design, plan, execute, strategy selection, measure, train, test, and maintain. I'm looking at also in IT. I've done that one for business, but for IT, we need to look at the project initiation and management, governance, risk assessment, still key in you have to link this business continuity management and risk management together. Business impact analysis, business continuity strategy and design, analysis, solutions, deployment and enhancement, business continuity plan testing, execution, training and awareness. Have we trained all our staffs in healthcare about business continuity life cycle to offer products and services at predefined time during this disruption time? We're looking at, these have been developed by Business Continuity Institute. We need to build a business case, understand the value, establish a business continuity program. I've done a simple one so that you understand this for supply chain. I'll take you through before my discussion. Conduct a business continuity risk assessment, a business continuity mitigation, assess the impact of disruptive events as per the definition of business continuity management by the ISO, define business continuity disruptive, develop a business continuity risk mitigation strategies in all our areas. Not only look at where you are as a responsible person, conduct a business impact analysis, identify business process, define critical processes in your area, define recovery time objective and recovery point objective for processes. Resources, it is identify other parties and physical resources for recovery. Define business recovery and continuity. Define staffing alternatives needed for recovery. Define alternative sourcing of critical functions. Define alternative offices needed for recovery. Plan to transition back to normal operations. The way we went down and came back, as you have seen in my previous slide, establish disasters recovery for information technology. I love technology. Understand business recovery requirements in our setup. Select recovery solution and recovery sites. Assume you lose power or you in your medical equipment. You know, your medical equipment is also an IT equipment. Deploy, verify, and maintain business continuity program capabilities. Deploy, we need to do awareness for staff on BCM. In your area, concentrate there. maintain the business continuity management program and business continuity plans. We have it in our strategic plan. Have you cascaded down to your team business continuity and business plans for your area? Exercise business continuity capable. Establish crisis communications and align with crisis management. Align with the emergency response and external agencies coordination. We have various providers. We have the Ministry of Health, we have the National Treasury, we have the COVID team. All this business continuity policy. What the policy should have, which I believe our Director of Planning and Strategy has developed. We have overall commitment statement. We have answers to the question why. It has the objective, details what you aspire to achieve. Then it looks at roles, responsibilities, and authorities. It answers the question, who will do what? Scope, then the boundaries of the business continuity plan. So the first step, you have to do business impact assessment. If you are dealing with, you are admitting patients in theater or in ICU, which is your critical process? Feeding the patient, checking vital signs to ensure that the area doesn't have, you are checking if there's, you are practicing IPC activities. In gatekeeping security, what do you need to do? Do you need to screen every car that comes in? In renal, what do you need to do? In A&E, what do you need to do? In research, what do you need to do for your clients who used to bring in investigation reports and bring statistics for analysis and follow-up? Business impact assessment. I'm looking at possible point in time at which organization decide that impacts will be unacceptable. We have, if you look at my graph, you can tell there's an impact and then the time. We have minutes, hours, days, weeks. Are we comfortable not to take patients in theater for weeks? Are we comfortable with that? It will affect our reputation in the first place. I believe there are no if we are working in a regulated environment like the banking sector, there'll be very heavy fines. Then we have financial loss. If we don't take patients for weeks to theater, we are losing revenue. Then contractual penalties, our suppliers, if they delay bringing consumables for us to deal with it, looking at the cumulative impact. So in your area, look at the various processes. Which service are you able to deal with for minutes? Signing letters, you can delay for weeks. What impact will it have? Which service or product are you able to delay for hours, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours a day? If there's a process in your area, like let's say anesthesia, or a good example will be, let's take OBS and gyna, the reproductive health, where the delivery room. Assume you delay a woman who has a lady who is pregnant and has high blood pressure, and you delay for days not to do the cesarean operation. What will happen? It will affect our reputation because it will increase the weeks, the financial loss, tapigiwa kelele all over newspaper. The impact over time in case of vulnerability of the critical activities. Identify and analyze the critical activities of the organization. Look in your area. This is just a simple way to do it. You can do it in Excel. Identify your services. You can allocate each people with critical areas if you have a big department or a big section. Deal with this one. Which services or products we cannot delay to offer for more than 2 hours or 2 days. The ones which you can deal with for 3 days, you know how to deal with it. That's a car. Looking at the business impact assessment, I'll not want to go through it. Look at if you have a car or you have used a car before. Look at the various items in a car. Headlight, if you are driving at night, what will happen if you are driving on Mombasa Road? Or Nakuru Eldoret highway with single lane, what will happen? Assume your spark plugs are low. They have reached the more than the mileage. Radiator, if your radiator is leaking, what will happen? Transmission, battery, if your battery, you rely on jump starting, assume you don't get people along the way to jump start you, what will happen to you? Look at your process. Like in theater, what are your critical items you need? Your equipment, medical equipment, have you listed them? Have you identified the ones which have warranties and they must have manufacturer's authorization? Look at it. Business outputs, the outputs of that business impact assessment. One, validate or modify the organization business continuity management service. Determine this, then compliance and its effect on business continuity requirements. You've already identified your products and services, delivery requirements and priorities. Identify relationships. How are you connected with the other departments and other providers? Determine resources for prioritized activities. We have seen during this time, as per the ISO 2301 2019 definition, products and services at predefined time during disruption. Just identify your prioritized activities. What are they? Maybe there are two. Maybe you have 10 services, but the key ones are two. Allocate more resources to them. Then we have understand dependencies. How are they depending on the others? Impact over time to justify business continuity requirement. Determine requirements for currency. Then risk assessment. You have to do it. Risk and risk management as per the requirement of ISO 31000. We have the likelihood and the impact and the residual risk. If the controls are working, we have the policies. One of them, as hospital, we have one of our controls is the strategic plan. We have a human resource policy. We have the treatment protocols. We have treatment charts. We have the RACI charts. Those, we call them controls. We have the medical equipment maintenance schedule. Those I call them as our controls. If they are not working, your risks will be very high. Business continuity, you need to look at it, evaluate all of it. Cyber security and availability of system, equipment failure, you keep on calling IT, I can't log in. Employee unavailability, third party apatikani. If the lifts are not working, maybe our service provider, the staff are not near, maybe they have gone for a weekend. And patients or key doctor are stuck in a lift. What happens? Hazard, customer changes. Look at it in the whole context, both the SWOT and the PESTEL. Strategy selection. Process one, business impact analysis. You need to process one, unavailability of system. I'm looking at IT, disaster recovery backups and incident management. If we have not backed up and a patient has paid and our system is not available, maybe we have a secondary site, unavailability of people. I'm looking at another process in HR. We have human resource policy, business continues, we have succession planning, health and safety, job rotation, and reskilling and outsourcing. We have identified areas that we are outsourcing. That's a business continuity strategy. I'm looking at unavailability of building. I'm looking at the strategy there is supplier redundancy. The supply is not available. Service level agreement, monitoring and enforcement. There's somebody who must enforce those services. Unavailability of suppliers, customer and product, unavailability of customers. Assume patients don't come to KNH. What happens? Plan and develop. Execute the strategies that have been identified. The strategies that have been identified during the strategy selection. During the strategy selection, we have looked at each process, the business impact, process one, from A and E to maybe the last office there. Look at all those processes. How are they supporting us? Then plan development, execute the strategies that have been identified, allocate those resources. Plan development, security incident management, process, disaster backup policies, we have them. Are we implementing them? Remote working for people above 80, above 58, sorry. Site resilience, crisis communication plans. When in case we have something in the media, how do we communicate? Do we have a template that we communicate? Warning and incident management, so that it advises management that you need to be on top of the things, or your area as a healthcare worker. Then exercising and testing. Plan activities, step 1. Step 2, develop exercise objectives and scope. Conduct the exercise, debrief, and post-exercise report. It's very important. It's not only about risk assessment only and risk management. You have to do all those exercises so that you're able to be able to implement ISO 31000 to continue in operation during these disruptions. I'm looking at top 5 causes of supply chain interruption. Transport logistics. I tried buying an item online through eBay last week, but I was refunded money because of failure of flights. Loss of talent and skills. We have seen during this pandemic, we have lost maybe key people, maybe through artificial natural attrition. Then we also have cyber attacks. We have looked at that case of Vietnam. Adverse weather, some areas are not accessible, unplanned or telecommunication outage. Supply chain life cycle. I want to pick a good example is supply chain. We have identified our requirements. We need to define relationships, skill and quality, define service levels and timelines, manage risk, select supply chain partners, contract with partners and establish service level agreements. We also have, we need to establish monitoring process, monitor and report. Then we also need to assess performance of these suppliers. Then renew maybe after every 2 years or 1 year or 6 months. We need to establish how we deal with these suppliers. Then we need to retire those who are not able to meet our service level agreement. How do we replace and bring on board new suppliers during this time of disruption? We have various categories of suppliers. We have strategic. Both of these is mutual benefit. A good example is government. Then we have tactical suppliers that help in managing. This cannot be replaced easily and hence need to be considered for continuity. For those suppliers who offer us radioactive drugs, they are maybe specific. You cannot do without them. They are very tactical. Then commodity suppliers of material and spare parts for manufacturing and maintaining infrastructure and other consumables. Those who supply us with maybe food items, laundry items, they can be multiple, which is better for continuity. Then we have niche providers of exclusive products and services without which it will be difficult to sustain enterprise operation. As healthcare, have we identified this? Have we categorized these suppliers? We need to, during this time of pandemic, we need to identify that this one we cannot do without. And we put it in our policy and come up with them. Like people who provide complex solutions like SAP, or of a component without which a product cannot be distributed. Like some of our pharmaceutical suppliers, those who are niche, they are the only ones maybe producing that superior product. Have we come up with a way and say, these are the niche providers? We didn't need to go through a long process and we're able to always handle them on a different scale than commodity suppliers. Mitigating concentration risk, we need to, for this, they like these niche suppliers who offer pharmaceutical and other key services, like those who offer oxygen for us. Have we performed due diligence by undertaking risk assessment at the time of selecting and onboarding suppliers? Assume all staff of the suppliers of oxygen, they are, I think they're only two. Assume they close down and maybe one or all of them. What happens to us? Do we close? Have we looked at their locations from where they might deliver the services? Maybe not only in KNH, other areas. Are we looking also at the ability to switch to a different location and deliver the work at short notice? Competence, including knowledge and skill sets with the suppliers to handle the enterprise at multiple locations, like we have KNH and Bagathi. Then we also look at financial stability to be able to support multiple location delivery. Is somebody monitoring the oxygen supplier companies? How is their financial? How did they perform last year? Are they dropping or improving? Agility and their adapted technology solutions. Are they working with new technologies? Have you, as our team, looked at maybe in India or South Africa, how are they dealing with the oxygen? Is the current oxygen supplier using the old technology? We need to review supplier contract terms to ensure that they cover hiring of supplier employees, considering to cover enterprise hiring of supplier, periodic supplier performance and compliance audit. Have we ever done audits for these? Like a good example, the oxygen companies. Have we looked updated supplier business to meet our requirements? Is there an exit process in case of or change? The sub should continue to provide services. Assume up to a reasonable period of maybe 3 or 6 months and should assist in knowledge transfer to a new supplier. Like the oxygen company, they decide to close maybe due to bankruptcy. Are we having a clause in that contract that they can continue offering the service for 3 or 6 months? Then they're able to transfer the new knowledge to a new supplier who was coming. We need to address this concentration risk of a single supplier. Maybe it's the only one supplying masks. We need to also look at to mitigate industry-level concentration risk. Industry players may adopt a consortium approach for dissemination of information and coordination with supply chain partners. Are we collaborating with other county hospitals, dispensaries about these certain suppliers in a consortium approach that depend on and its may join hands to assess, respond to, and monitor associated risk? For those who are depending on a key, like those level 6, 5, depending on a particular supplier to supply them certain products, have we done a joint consortium to know how they are dealing with some certain items or challenges? We need also to continue monitoring process includes one, periodic monitoring of the supply chain to understand impact due to supplier independency. Identify concentration risk and taking appropriate to handle such risk, including investing time and effort in creating an alternate source for supplies, communicating with the enterprise risk management committee regarding dependency levels, the performance of suppliers, or deficiency in service or supplier capacity to handle new business, so that we don't have panic buying or switching to a new supplier without maybe the new supplier is going to charge you a higher price compared to the niche the niche supplier. Some key risks for concentration risk include reducing revenue levels of those vendors, high turnover of vendors, employees, delayed services. Are we looking at those in the healthcare during this pandemic? Are they using old technology? What I'm trying to say here is we need to align our BCP with suppliers. We need to align our business continuity management practices with the supplier. If a supplier lacks adequate BCP capacity, the enterprise may elect to prepare its continuity plan without considering the supplier continuity plan. Maybe some of these suppliers, they are operating from their houses. Assume that place, it cannot pay the rent during this time of pandemic. Have we looked at a way you can exit that? Have you prepared a continuity plan? We need also to engage these suppliers when we are testing our business continuity. Participate in supplier business continuity testing and analyze results to adjust mutual continuity plan. I believe some of these suppliers are big. You can ask them, you want to see how they are doing their business continuity plan. Like for key customer like KNH, if they are offering masks and sanitizers, assume they ran out of the raw material, where will you buy it from? Contingency planning during pandemics. We need to adapt. We need to use information technology as much as possible. We need to establish strong communication system with these suppliers. We need to digitally connect logistics to help manufacturers in contingency planning. Human resources and continuity. We need to ensure employees have a clear understanding of their roles, and in particular for business continuity management and crisis management during this time. Develop a succession plan, identify critical staff and based on the business impact analysis, assess the efficiency, resiliency, and security of employee home networks for those who are working from home. Ensure that suppliers can provide remote maintenance. They don't need to come to our premises. They can be able to support us wherever they are. Then set up a communication channel for employees for reporting. Do we have a communication channel for employees for reporting in KNH and our other healthcare providers? Conclusion: business continuity in a supply chain should not be optional. It must be part of an overall business continuity plan. Best practices can help, for example, monitoring supply chain partners for performance and quality, aligning enterprise continuity plans with that of supply chain partner, avoiding single point of failure situation, ensuring redundancy where possible, and understanding maintaining good working relationships. Situations like the current pandemic affect the global supply chain. Being prepared for such situations by planning in advance makes business sense. Applying these supply chain concepts to other functions of the enterprise and then applying the risk management principle will pave the way for the enterprise to evolve and further strengthen its business continuity management efforts. Thank you so much for being attentive. I return the...
Thank you very much, Mr. Eric Omondi, for your presentation. And even as you were asking the questions and doing your presentation, I was actually sitting and thinking the way a good number of us are crying that COVID-19 has brought losses and it has, like, many people are struggling. And then we forget that besides the scandal of COVID billionaires, there are people who've taken the COVID pandemic and actually seen the risks, and it has created opportunities for them, even in terms of their businesses, in terms of their workplaces, and they've learned how to adapt even in terms of this pandemic. And I think this is a very pertinent issue that we need to, you're bringing out, and even as healthcare workers, we need to understand and look at it. I already know of several healthcare workers who are actually having to undergo the pay cut because of the places they are working at. They don't have the business continuity plan. And I think this is pertinent, even though most of us healthcare workers don't think that it is something that we should look into. And maybe some people have their own clinics or they've begun their hospitals. And I think this is a really interesting discussion that you've brought up. So from the attendees, Muredi is saying, well-articulated topic. Then Simon Kibias is saying, thank you for the presentation. Maybe you can touch on the disaster risk management cycle. That's a question from Simon Kibias.
Okay. For disaster risk management cycle, if I go back to my screen, I'm looking at for disaster. In the definition of business continuity management, ISO 2019, it talks about products, you're able to offer products and services and at predefined time during disruption. For disaster, I'll look at it in terms of, I'll try to respond it in terms of maybe you're working in clinical areas. I'm looking at the medical equipment. Assume you are in a theater and one of the, let's say, blood pressure equipment, and you have a patient on the table. You have already opened his heart and you want to do operation, but the blood pressure equipment is not working. Do you have a system in place? Like, do you have a list of people who participate in business continuity management? That's one. Have you identified that process that is likely to fail? Maybe you have different people. You have assigned maybe one person for medical equipment. You have assigned another person for to deal with consumables. You have assigned other person for supply of blood. You have assumed maybe one of the medical team, maybe an anesthetist, is diagnosed with COVID when he or she was coming to the theater. He or she receives an email that she's been, the person will not be okay to come in for the operation or for the exercise. What measures have you put in place in case Dr. So-and-so, Dr. X fails to turn up for that activity? Who is there on standby to replace that person? Does that exercise stop? It should not stop. It is offering products and services at predefined time during disruption. You have to continue with it. So you need to look at your process. It is still, you're offering business continuity, that you're offering services, so that you looked at our chat on our business impact assessment. I talked about which services are we able to deal with, to wait for a minute, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours. Assume that patient you have already opened his heart and the anesthetist has received a message that he or she has a COVID. What, how many minutes will be able to replace him or her for the exercise to continue? I'm looking at also, yeah, I can answer it using various examples. Maybe we'll touch base during the year as we deal with this exercise dealing with risk management and business continuity management. It is in our strategic plan that we need to have business continuity management activities cascaded in various areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eric Omondi. I'd like to give Dr. Simon Kibias an opportunity maybe to even clarify on his question and even introduce himself and tell us how they've managed to mitigate risk at the national level. Daktari, karibu.
Unmute on your side, Daktari.
Thank you, Nancy. Good evening, participants. First of all, I say thank you for the welcome. Thank you for that presentation, Dr. Omondi. Thank you so much. At least you've really taken us through the risk management, and I really enjoyed the presentation. And what it means is that we really have to invest in risk management as a part of our routine activities, because with it, we shall be informed of some of the things we're supposed to be putting in place, and at the same time, what needs to be avoided so that we continue performing well. And I think with us at the national level, with this pandemic, we've had the task force at the national level that has been looking at all these aspects on a continuous basis. And the technical expertise in that task force has been very resourceful in identifying some of the risks. Some groups were looking at what is missing, like for example, the need for new guidelines and SOPs and all that. And on continuous basis, we went on improving on it. For example, we didn't have some case management guidance, and within a short time, the case management team of experts came up with first case management guidance for COVID-19. Initially, it was Corona, then COVID-19, and it was quickly adopted, but it kept on being modified. And then eventually, several other guidelines came on board, and they were all, at the end of the day, just to reduce the discussion, we ended up uploading it using the ICT, using the technology, uploading it in the Ministry of Health website. Initially, it was not easy to reproduce, to Google it, but eventually it was re-uploaded again in a much better fashion, whereby you could use linked pathway, such that you could click on it and be able to access the guidelines so easily. Right now, we have very many guidelines and SOPs, 52 plus. It's keep growing as the new issues come in. For example, you may have seen that we ended up already with, for example, home-based isolation guidelines and management. So, and that needed guidelines, IPC, dead body management, and so on and so on. So we kept on adapting based on the risks identified and so on. So I think Mr. Omondi, you took us through very well the risk management, and I think it should be an integral part of the response to any disaster or pandemic. Now, going back to the disaster risk management cycle, I just wanted to emphasize on the fact that it's a continuous cycle in which now there is an hazard that has been identified. In this instance, for example, is the pandemic, and then that means it goes through the phase of the initial preparedness. So a lot of questions that we were asking ourselves are we prepared? And we've seen so many answers. Some bit of ill preparedness, some little preparedness in surveillance, this and that. And then there is the early response. So how did we do that? Yeah, those are area operational research will answer that, and then we build on it. If we were not prepared, then we need to know what we didn't have in place. We have to really document. Then there is the response part of it. Yeah, and then after the response, all the phases, it can either be short, precise, and very successful, or just a prolonged response. And then it can, again, a lot of things go into that. There are a lot of issues that we're still responding at the moment, for example. So, and there are so many things happening around there, which needs to be dissected and be analyzed, and reports being done. And post-action review will come up with the full details of how we responded, how we did very well or where we didn't do very well. And the element of risk management should be part of this. And then in broadly, we have recovery. You know, once you've responded, then other expertise come in on board now to look at how do we recover best after the problem. So there are things that you put in place as you recover. But if you look at it closely, even as you do the early preparedness and early response, you start putting in the elements of recovery into it. What we call sometimes also mitigation, mitigating the impacts and trying to correct them as we go along. But what is more important, so that I summarize it, is that after looking at what the situation that on the status situation that we were in before the Assad, and after the Assad truck has landed, and we had to look for this and that. We had to look for PPEs. We had to look for swaps. We had to look for test kits. We had to look for machines to run the test. We had to look for additional staff and so on. So we start identifying the gap. And what that means is, when you're recovering now, it should be on your mind that those things that you didn't have, you must now put them in place and looking at the future, so that you create a resilience, or more dimensions about resilience, creating resilience at the end of the day. What it means is that after the Assad is over, the pandemic is through, we are through with the pandemic, maybe somewhere in April next year or something, then in case another pandemic comes along, maybe another virulent agent strikes, we should be much more resilient to the extent that it should not become a major issue. That now the communities are aware of what needs to be done just by stroke of the pen or some information passed on that, hey, yeah, there's another flu. Then people are straight wearing masks, for example, or some quarantine and restrictions and all that within a very short time. That means the certain communities are very resilient. So build back better means you put in place all that you didn't have, and even in a much better way, format. You know, if you didn't have a good isolation facilities, now KNH, you did produce an isolation facility at Bagadi. Then you need to think very strongly now that probably you need to have a facility like this going forward. Once they will have no problem, you have to possibly have a facility, or maybe NMS comes up with an isolation facility with a good capacity, each county, for example, and so on, having enough beds, ICI dependency, HDU or ICU beds. Then you put them and leave them in place, knowing that, well, it looks in future, if a similar hazard strikes, then we will be in a position to absorb the shocks. And then again, you address all the issues: human resource, essential commodities, supplies, stockpiling, prepositioning, training the staff regularly, preparedness, doing simulations and so on. And that means, and that's the element I wanted to bring about building back better, means you leave the health sector much more resourced, much more prepared, alert, and all that, so that in future, if a similar hazard strikes, then the community and the whole health care system will be in a major, better position to absorb the shock, and that is the resilience, the meaning of resilience. So I brought in the element of to finalize the risk. The risk is a factor of vulnerability and the hazard. So in the health sector, for example, we've been able to identify, when we did the vulnerability assessment, we came up with top five hazards in the country. It included viral infections, for example, and floods and all that. So once you know the hazards that can affect your community, then you look at the vulnerability. Then when you prepare for it, then you are addressing the risk. So I'd like to finish at that the level of the risks depends on you identifying the hazards that can affect the community, and also the vulnerability. The vulnerability are all those processes that we were talking about, how the systems are, what do you have in place, and so on and so on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Simon Kibias. Maybe before I let you rest and get more questions Mr. Eric Omondi, I'd like to ask you a few questions in terms of continuity of services. Would you say that from the previous pandemics up until now, we've learned something and that our response to the COVID pandemic was better? And what would you say should we have done differently? And then has there been any impact of COVID-19 on continuity of services, such as immunization programs, ANC, and other programs, and how have they been affected?
Thank you. I will respond to the level I can. And you see, yes, we've been through a similar situation before. You remember the Ebola outbreak in West Africa, in which we were placed at level 2 risk level by the WHO. But because of the close proximity in view of the flight connectivity between West Africa and Kenya, and also possible routes through Congo by road, we were able to ban the flights, and then also applied quite a good measure of surveillance measures, like screening at the border, on the ground entry points. And after that, we still have several other incidents, even last year, even up to the time when we got this pandemic, we still were on a high alert because of the Ebola outbreak in Congo. So the pandemic found us already having some the harm of preparedness active on the ground, that is surveillance. So it was just a matter of getting concurrence from other sectors to agree on much more stricter measures, and we actively participated in convincing the other sectors to institute early travel flight bans, and with all others participated, community and all that, we managed to ban flights and institute quarantines and strict surveillance in the beginning. But just like any other country, there were always many other routes of leakages of people who had active COVID-19, and we ended up with community transmission of the same. But if you look at it closely, comparing the mathematics modeling, the early predictions, we were able to keep the numbers down. And I think some of the successes is because of sustained early response and sustained response to this pandemic. So to some great extent, I can't speak for now until a post-action review is done, but in my own opinion, I think we done fairly well, given our first experience with a pandemic of this nature, because one, the case fatality rate is compared to the regional figures, 1.7% is lower than African region rate of 2.1, I think, and the globally of 6.4 is much higher. So we've been able to keep case fatality rates low. But you may ask questions, maybe there is a low reporting of deaths in the communities. But once we get any operational research reports on registration of births and deaths at the community, then we'll be able to compare figures. But so far, comparisons of 2019, 2020 mortality figures still does not suggest that we've done badly on case fatality rate. And there is also the reduced, we've seen that we've been cautioned against thinking that we have made success in positivity rate until a further data is received from hospitalization rates, admission to ICUs, and other demographic data. We'll be able to tell whether the drop in the positivity rate is another indicator of some early success. So generally, we still are having a high case load, and we still have active community transmission. So we are still at too early to do a conclusion. So we've not had another except maybe that was smallpox, and I can't remember. That's 1978. I think that was globally Kenya participated, and it was eradicated. Polio has already been done away with. That means we already had a very strong surveillance system in the country, which is one arm of the preparedness for any pandemic of global health security. And Kenya is doing very well in terms of IHR, the national health regulations, whereby we are reporting timely, and we are very transparent and open in what we are doing, and we are doing it to the highest standard possible. So in terms of diagnostics, screening, doing isolation and quarantine, we're doing it in a very, very professional way. So we expect maybe a fair judgment once the post-action review is done. And I can't remember, the last question you asked was on what? Maybe you can repeat the last one, with the one I didn't answer.
Yeah, so I think you've addressed most of all the questions. They've been addressed with your response.
Okay. So yeah. I think what you can learn, there's a lot to be learned, a lot. If the documentation is very good. Kenya, we had so many programs running. We've learned that going forward, we must invest in continuous public health control measures. We hope to invest more in a continuity of public health control measures. Like, it's a lot of benefits already. We've seen, if it were possible, I don't want to be the one who advocate for very unpopular measures like control of alcohol consumption, for example. I'm sure so many people are still wondering, well, probably the mortality reduction in it is because of reduction in accidents and so on. But it's very important for us to relook at some of the social determinants of health going forward. And in addition, just to include water, sanitation, and hygiene, some of the things that we've been taking for granted, so that we invest and continuously sustain some of these services at a community level. And we can do it now at a time when it matters and a lot. So going forward, investing more in public health response measures is very important. Strengthening the health systems to meet any eventuality in terms of highly specialized care, like in high dependency units, ICUs, and other systems. And because we cannot be so sure what the next hazard that will strike. So it is very important to also, we've been through, for example, other movements like a PPI or what have you, it has come to our attention that we need now to lobby for more resources to the health sector, more funding, more human resource for health. When we were discussing with other sectors, it was realized it's the health sector that has not met the UN ratio of population to the workforce. The discipline process have attained their target. The teaching sector has attained. It's only in the health sector that we are doing something around 10 per 10,000 health workers, per 10,000 health workforce. So this is an opportunity for us through the universal health coverage, which we are in the implementation phase, to push for more allocation of resources for human resource, allocate for more funding mechanism, the improved mechanism for funding for the health sector, so that we probably work towards getting towards the Abuja Declaration allocation of funds to the health sector, the 15%. So I think this one has given us an opportunity to think of a broadening shift towards allocating more resources towards the preventive, promotive, have more financial allocation to the health sector. And I think that is the best thing to do going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maybe the last question to Mr. Eric Omondi, even as we come to a close, I can see our time is almost up. Having had the experience at KNH and seeing the COVID pandemic from its start, even now as we are getting used to the idea that COVID is here with us, what would you tell other facilities, small and large, in terms of the business continuity plan and risk management? What would be your advice for them?
Thank you, Daktari. Thank you, Dr. Kibias, for that wonderful comment. Daktari Ngubau, for me, other facilities and other healthcare providers, my advice will be, one, they need to establish the context of the organization. One, that is, what are their strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats, and what is the external environment. They need also to prepare. They need to have a governance structure. They need to have board. They need to have board support. They need to have budget, and resources. Very key. You cannot do business continuity management and risk without resources. And also you need to have a dedicated team that is doing continuous monitoring and review, and also sharing the experiences, exchange program through maybe the webinars. What are you doing in your facility, maybe in Machakos, Kwale? Maybe it is working well down there. Maybe I'm not doing well at KNH. That continuous talk. How are you handling the various processes? And most organizations have not invested in business continuity management. They were in paper. They were never tested. Now is the time people have come to realize it's important to test them and continuously test them, like every month, test them and go through the results. What did we miss? Like a case of theater. What did we miss in IT? What did we miss in finance? What did we miss in supply chain? I'm very sure some organizations are really suffering if they were relying more on global supply chain. They cannot be able to produce some items. Yeah. So for me, my advice, let's invest more in resources and ensure that there's always continuous knowledge sharing the way we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Maybe just as a parting shot to everyone who's attended, Mr. Eric, maybe you can give us a parting shot, even as we come to the end of this session.
Pardon?
What would be your advice to the attendees? Our attendees are different healthcare providers from all over the country. So what would be your advice?
For my attendees, if they don't have risk management policies and framework, they can reach out to us so that they don't need to reproduce the wheel. They just try and we take them through, maybe through a session like this, and also ensure that they allocate resources, that is in terms of budgets, and also skills. It requires time to reach whereby they be able to handle the two items together, risk management and business continuity management, and the assessments. And they ensure that they start small, they don't go big. They should not put things which they cannot be able to handle, because already budgets have been approved, procurement plans have been approved. They just need to work with what they have, and they can see tremendous change, the way we have seen at KNH. Thank you. And for any
Thank
more
you.
question, they can reach us for more further discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eric Omondi, for your presentation, and thank you, Dr. Simon Kibias, for asking your question and even giving us insights on a national level. We've come to the end of this session for today. I hope we've learned something, we've taken something home. For me, what I've learned is with each risk comes opportunities that we can use to better build ourselves and to better address the risks. So as a reminder, there'll be our medical legal webinar symposium every Wednesday. So it started last week Wednesday. We'll be having this week Wednesday, and we'll discuss legal issues in health this Wednesday. I've seen several queries about CPD points. For nurses, we are really working hard to sort out the CPD issues. We've reached out to your council. We've actually subscribed, and we're in the process of getting them electronically. If they will accept the previous method where we can sign, we would also be willing to do that, but we're also working with your councils closely. I've seen several, for any other issues of CPD, kindly email us, knhcpd@gmail.com or cpdpharmacy@gmail.com. I've seen a comment where you're saying our webinars are not on the pharmacy portal, and we look into that and ensure that it's there. And then you can also kindly confirm. So tomorrow we'll be having our medical legal issues in health, staying in the practice and out of court. On Thursday, we'll have a very interesting discussion where we look at the effects of COVID-19 on HIV programs. And I think that'll be one of the key webinars to attend to see how has COVID-19 affected our programs, and will we see long-term effects even as we go forward. Thank you very much to everyone who's attended. Thank you, Mr. Mwenda, on the background. Have a nice afternoon.